Hello everyone and welcome to episode 2 of The Congregation. My name is Ryan MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod and I am your host here on our second outing of this vidcast, podcast, whatever you want to call it. But if you're tuning in for the first time, what is this show? The Congregation is a letter writing show where basically you can write into this show using the email at the bottom of this video to basically discuss anything regarding video games or adjacent to video games. So if you want to talk about whatever games came out at the time that you're watching this, if you want to talk about your favourite games of all time, maybe your favourite movie based on a video game, or even music game soundtracks, whatever you want to discuss, this is a platform and a community to do so, where we can have a civil discourse over your opinion and my opinion and opinions of anyone else who's watching who are free to write in as well. And just in comparison to social media, we can be a bit impulsive. It means that we all get a chance to sit and think and consolidate our thoughts and again really get that sort of civil discourse going. Now, this is the early days of the channel. If you're watching this, it's still mid-pandemic, hence the beard, hence the hair. Yeah, we're still in early days at the moment, so obviously there's no letters to read out on a letter writing show. So in these early days, I'm basically just going to refer to articles that maybe just go over whatever we want to discuss. So a lot's gone on in this particular week, so all three things that we're discussing are news developments that have happened over recent days. But if you go back to last week's episode, we've done a lot of retrospectives. We discussed the Tony Hawk's franchise and we discussed Harmonix, the music-based video game studio. And there will be, generally speaking, I feel like this will be mostly a retrospective channel with, maybe discussing one or two things of recent relevance to that week's episode. But this week is definitely all news, all stuff that's came around in the first week. So with that out of the way, we can actually just get straight into this week's subjects. Now, earlier this week, it was announced that Netflix had hired a vice president of their video game division, which kind of took some people a little bit off guard there, because if you've been paying attention, over the past couple of weeks and months, I think maybe even a year at this point, there have always been mumblings about Netflix wanting to get into the video game industry. There have been certain things licensed out, so for example, the Dark Crystal TV show that they produced, they licensed out a video game adaptation which came out to mixed reviews, to be honest. There was also a retro sort of iteration of Stranger Things, which I think all three seasons have received a port of, and that appeared I think first on app stores and then later progressed to consoles. And I remember playing that first one back in the day on my phone on the way back from work one time, and I thought it was fairly competent. Can't honestly say I played all of it or the rest of them, but there are these little inklings, and as well as their choose your own adventure film projects they've done, like Bandersnatch from Black Mirror. Kimmy Schmidt had a version of it, and Bear Griffiths, I think I'm pronouncing that right. They've all had their own little choose your own adventures, so they're starting to inch themselves in there. But now they've went and hired a VP by the name of Mike Verdu, who used to work at Electronic Arts and Oculus. I'm a little bit skeptical of any ex-Electronic Arts veteran, but no, it seems like they're fully planning on going ahead. Now, we're going to take a little look at an article from Forbes by Brad Agate, who wrote this on June 3rd, so that's a month and a half prior to this announcement of the hiring of Mr. Mike Verdu. So again, this is a bit of a retrospective article. We can just see how it kind of panned out in real time. So Brad writes this for Forbes. Just a little thing in advance. So this is an extract of the article. If you want to read the full article, the link will be in the description down below. So have a little read of that if you want to delve a little bit further into this. But Brad writes, there have been reports Netflix is considering a launch of a video game service to expand their subscriber counts and provide a new revenue stream. Although video gaming has been around for decades, during the pandemic, the industry reported strong revenue growth, which is expected to continue in years ahead. Simply put, video gaming has become the fastest growing entertainment category, with revenues larger than the movie and music industries combined. A little bit more on that in a second. It has been widely reported Netflix is looking to hire an executive to manage their nascent video game plans. One possibility for a potential Netflix gaming initiative will be a reduced version of Apple Arcade, a subscription-based ad-free model consisting of exclusive, higher-end games. Video gaming content is expected to come both from Netflix-owned intellectual property and other independent studios. Netflix has in the past licensed to third-party developers, several based on their popular Stranger Things program. Netflix has also produced an interactive version of their series finale of the comedy The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, a choose-your-own adventure, which we've already discussed. Netflix has indicated a greater interest with the interactive entertainment. With the pandemic changing consumers' media behaviour, in 2020, video gaming had a record year with sales exceeding into 2021. Globally, in 2020, video gaming revenue totaled $167.9 billion. So that's just short of $170 billion worldwide across 2020. Now I'm going to pause the article here. I said I was going to come back to this, but I just went in good old Google and had a look at movie box office revenue, just to compare the two industries. And in 2019, I wasn't going to use 2020 for obvious reasons, but in 2019, the year of Endgame, you know, the one that keeps fluctuating with Avatar to be the biggest selling movie of all time, in 2019, the global box office was only 42.5 billion. Again, let's go back to the video game example. 168 billion, basically. Like that's over triple of what movies are worth. I mean, that doesn't take into account things like home rentals and DVD sales. But let's be honest, in the age of streaming, it's not going to be that much more. So yeah, like video. Yeah, we'll come back to this at the end of the article. Continuing. Video gaming is especially popular with teens and young adults aged 14 to 24, which has helped to boost sales. According to the latest annual Digital Media Trends report from Deloitte, 26% of Generation Z listed video gaming as their most favourite entertainment activity, well ahead of listening to music, web browsing, social media, television and movies. Moreover, 46% of Generation Z said that video game playing has taken away from other entertainment sources. Netflix has cited such popular video games as Fortnite to be bigger competition than HBO. Netflix gaming plans are still reportedly in flux, but it's expected the video gaming venture could be launched as soon as 2022. Nevertheless, it should be a sure thing for Netflix. It will not be a sure thing for Netflix, my apologies. Google Stadia launched a cloud gaming platform in late 2019 and has not gained any traction. Also, Amazon recently said they have plans to launch Luna on a gaming platform, which is currently in beta testing. So again, you can read the full article over on Forbes, but yeah, it really kind of echoed a lot of what I was saying at the start there. It's undoubtedly that video gaming is the primary entertainment industry at this point. I mean, no one's ever going to argue against movies and television, etc. Now, that figure right out at global box office, as I said, it wouldn't count for merchandising, Blu-rays, but I think if you added all that up, it would still just fall short of what video games are operating at. And video games, you know, they have a lot of merchandise nowadays. If you want to buy replicas for cosplay or just action figurines, or even display models, you know, like your Hot Toys and things like that. So I think there is a lot of money still to be made in the video game industry. It's still a very infantile industry. I think when we see the big three, Nintendo, Sony and Microsoft, they're not going to be the big three forever. Things are going to change. Who knows, one day Sony could fall by the wayside and Netflix could be the next big one, because Netflix has a massive installer base to begin with. So if they start video gaming, they've got the strongest platform to jump off right there. Now, obviously, early days, I'm sure we'll look back on this video in a year's time and we'll see how it panned out, but there's no talk about how this is actually going to play out. Is it going to play through the Netflix app? If so, the Netflix app's available on so many devices. What will be the input? Will you be able to sync a controller? I know that the TV stick that we use for Netflix doesn't really have any compatibility for Bluetooth devices, so I think there is going to be some kind of restrictions on how you can access these gaming services. They probably will have simpler games, which is literally just a D-pad, a simple platform or something like that, something that anyone can play on any device, because let's face it, you need a D-pad to navigate Netflix, so it's an assumption that you will be able to play those kinds of games. But to play full-on game experiences, I think we will see a Netflix-specific device of some sort, be it one of those HDMI dongles that just plugs in your television, or maybe just a little gaming block. You know, something along the lines of what these Retro Pi, Raspberry Pis look like. Really, really small black box that just sits nicely next to your television. So it will be interesting to see how this Netflix situation pans out again. Hiring an ex-EA executive, don't know how that's quite going to go. But, yeah, we'll wait and see, I guess. So, with that out of the way, over the last week or so, 2 weeks I should say, Sony have came out and announced not one but two director's cuts of two of their last gen PS4 titles to debut exclusively on the PS5. That's Ghost of Tsushima and Death Stranding. Now, there's been a little bit of confusion regarding the title of director's cut and what a director's cut actually means. So to start this conversation, we're going to go over to GameRant.com, where Mohit Saeed has written an article called "It Looks Like Director's Cut Games Could Be a New Trend." Now again, this is an excerpt of the article, so if you want to read the full article, the link will be in the description down below. But we'll just have a quick read through this and then have a little discussion. The games industry is still in its infancy compared to older traditional forms of entertainment like movies and TV, so witnessing new and innovative marketing and release strategies is commonplace. A new trend has started to gain traction is the director's cut. Much like how it works for movies and TV, the director's cut symbolises the original vision for the game that the director has. As witnessed by previous releases, the director's cut usually adds some content on top of the original release, with a few graphical bells and whistles for good measure. Sony seems to be going all in on director's cut for some of its biggest last-gen titles. Hideo Kojima announced Death Stranding director's cut during Jeff Knightley's Summer Game Fest 2021 kickoff livestream. This version of Death Stranding seems to be exclusive to the PS5, unlike the base version, which also received a PC port after its initial release. More recently, Sony unveiled Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut, which includes the Iki Isle expansion. The announcement trailer for the former teases something Metal Gear related, but details remain sparse in classic Kojima fashion. In addition to the added content, there are some improvements to the visuals, frame rates and haptics, as both are optimised for next-gen devices. It's not just Sony that seems to be starting this trend, as many games like Deus Ex, Human Revolution and Mafia 2 have received similar releases before now, just to name a few. That being said, the relatively short gap between releases and the stature that Sony enjoys within the industry would seem to indicate that if the trend continues, the Japanese giant will be one of the driving forces. It still remains to be seen how different these versions are from the original releases, particularly of Death Stranding, but the trend does provide an interesting insight into what it can mean for the industry going forward. The director's cut of a video game could be the best version, doubling down on the mechanics and the content that might have been cut due to budget or time constraints. There's also the fact that these developers get a lot of feedback from the community post-release, which can be incorporated into a director's cut to curate the experience in a manner that fans would enjoy it the most. This could be particularly monumental for games that had a mixed reception like Death Stranding. While many previous re-releases don't instill much confidence, a case could be made for how these cuts are probably a better form of re-release than Game of the Year edition or full-price remasters. Given how important the role of a creative director has become, especially in the AAA space, the director's cut could evolve into a bigger trend moving forward. Hopefully it adds more value to the games fans love without coming off as predatory. So that last note about predatory is where a lot of the controversy around these director's cuts has actually came into place here. Basically, these are being sold as PS5 exclusives. Now, in the case of the Iki Isle expansion for Ghost of Tsushima, that's still going to PS4 apparently. But to own the director's cut is going to be PS5 exclusive for both of these formats, both of these games, sorry. And particularly in Death Stranding's example, that was ported to PC, and that's not getting a director's cut either. So I think what we're seeing here with the director's cut labeling, I don't think Sony's applying it as a means to say this is a director's cut in actuality. I think what we're seeing is just another labeling, an alternative labeling system. Director's cut, Game of the Year edition, Platinum edition, and in this example, here's a director's cut of Silent Hill 2. This is probably 20 years old, at least at this point. So director's cuts are definitely nothing new, they've been around a long time. But things like Platinum re-releases, PlayStation Classics, what was the one they brought out for PS4 with the red banner? PS4 Essentials, I think it was called. So I really think this is just another labelling system, and Hideo Kojima has actually came out and said this is not a director's cut of Death Stranding because the game that originally came out was the director's cut. He is the director. And as Mode was saying in the article there, in movies, a director's cut basically means that stuff was cut out due to time constraints, budget constraints. So the director's cut comes in later on when they able to apply things after the fact, maybe remaster some deleted scenes and things like that. And that's just quite simply not what we're getting in these director's cuts that are going to PS5. And I think the PS5 angle is something that we do need to address here. PS5 is having a really rough launch because of the pandemic, let's be honest here. Units aren't getting to people due to a combination of the pandemic, the impact on the manufacturing industry, the semiconductor shortage, which was both caused and affected by said pandemic, and then scalpers on top of that for those units that do get produced. So the PS5 install base is just not there at the moment. So what they're having to do is put a lot of games onto PS4. God of War, Horizon Forbidden West, I think the latter there was actually originally meant to come to PS4 anyway, but God of War was always touted as a next gen. I do suspect we may get a port of Demon's Souls at some point to PS4. And they're doing this purely because they're not making the sales they need to on PS5 at the moment. Because by the time that the install base is there, maybe in a year, maybe 2 years, the interest for things like Demon's Souls will have died down, and a lot more third-party games will come out. You know, if Call of Duty still releases on a yearly schedule, you'll have 2 or 3 new Call of Duty games to play on your PS5. There'll probably be a new Assassin's Creed by the time things go back to normal. And all these PS5 exclusives that have came out, I don't think they're going to sell in the long term. Yes, when they come to things like sales after the fact, but not at that full MSRP, which is where the money is, let's be honest. So with all these early next-gen games coming back to PS4 essentially, and again, I don't think we've necessarily seen the last of that, there needs to be some kind of incentive to get a PS5. So bringing out these director's cuts is a way to give exclusivity to the PS5 without too negatively affecting the last gen install base. Like I said, the Iki Island expansion for Ghost of Tsushima is coming to PS4. I've still got my disc of Ghost of Tsushima there, so I probably will check it out. I think it's only meant to be something like £15 or £20, so I'll give that a try for certain. But it's not providing a reason that people need to go and get a PS5, which I think is and isn't probably what Sony's aiming for here. But they want something to be there in place so that when people do get a PS5, it's there for them to try, and that's why they've got the upgrade options for PS4. So you could technically go on the PS Store now, even if you don't have a PS5, you could buy these director's cuts and have it there on your account ready to go when you do eventually get your PS5. So to kind of go back to the original point now, I think I digressed a little there. The director's cut, don't pay any attention to it. It's not a director's cut. It's purely just another label like Game of the Year Edition, Platinum, whatever, Hubble Essentials. So director's cut, not really. But I think most informed people can probably see past that and realise that it's just a marketing label. And when you've got the creator of one of the games coming out saying it's not a director's cut, it's probably good to just pay heed to that. So the last thing I want to discuss today, and a bit of a longer discussion, hence why I've left it for last here. I've got the two early ones out of the way. Just the day before the show started, sorry, got my days mixed up. Just yesterday, they announced Steam Deck. Valve has came out and announced their own handheld portable gaming device, which is basically just a handheld PC. Now, while leaning to the positive side, it's been a bit mixed. I think it's because not a lot of people know quite what to make of it at this point. On Twitter, it's very positive. I think a lot of people are excited for it. Personally, I'm not entirely sure who the Steam Deck is for at this point. And to kind of get us going, we're going to go over to Digital Foundry, good old Digital Foundry. Richard Ledbetter writes via Eurogamer on this. There have been rumours, rumblings and actual solid reporting of a handheld from Valve for some time now, but the hardware has finally broken cover, and it's looking promising. Steam Deck is built on the same architectural building blocks as the new consoles from Sony and Microsoft, downscaled and refactored from a handheld. With up to 1.6 teraflops of GPU compute power aimed at delivering circa 720p gaming, the idea is to break PC gaming free from the traditional limitations of the PC itself. It's a handheld designed to be as liberating as a Nintendo Switch, but tied into the openness and sheer size of the Steam ecosystem. I should say as well that this is excerpts of the article that Richard's written, so if you want to go and see the full article and read it for yourself, where he delves a lot more into the actual specifications, which we don't go into here, definitely check out the link, because it's quite good to see the comparisons he makes. The most interesting elements of Steam Deck are the semi-custom AMD processor and the background operating system, and we'll start with the first. Valve, via IGN, describes the chip as being next-gen in nature using the latest architectures, which is true, but only if we consider the consoles as the defining factor of what a generation actually is. You can effectively consider Steam Deck's chip as being most similar in nature to the Xbox Series S, with significant reductions in all dimensions. The hardware looks best in class for a handheld, and if Valve's intent is to deliver some level of competition to the Nintendo Switch with its pricing, the value proposition is off the charts, relatively speaking. However, it is the software that has all to prove. Steam Deck is effectively a PC as open as any other. There is nothing stopping you from installing Windows or any other operating system. However, that's not what the deck ships with. What you're getting is an evolution of SteamOS, meaning that Linux is the primary operating system. This presents something of a problem in that actual native support for Linux is thin on the ground, while support for the preferable Vulkan graphics API is stronger, but still far from taking root as an industry standard. This is still the area where I'm cautious about Steam Deck's chances of fully delivering on the potential. The compatibility layer will still need to be phenomenally good to get the best performance from what is an excellent processor, judged by mobile standards, but a rather weak one relative to a mainstream gaming PC. Questions also need to be asked about overall game performance, and we need to see much more of the system before we can offer any kind of definitive verdict. On one hand, we've seen the device running challenging AAA fare. Running the full-fat PC rendition of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order on a mobile processor is no mean feat. Even more impressive than that is the split-second view we had of Remedy's Control running on the system. So by extension, we can assume a very healthy level of performance for Steam Deck on the vast majority of PC titles in the Steam library. And let's not forget that we're talking about a catalogue of games here that stretches back decades. However, on the flip side, we have to think about the gaming generation to come. Let's not forget about the Series S, which is considerably more power hungry in its pursuit of 60 frames per second for much of its library. Dynamic resolution ranges are already hitting 720p minimums or even lower, and that's using a very low level version of DirectX 12 built specifically for the silicon. Comparisons with Nintendo Switch also need to be treated with some degree of caution. On one hand, there is no doubt that at the core specs level, Steam Deck is literally generations ahead in every dimension. But at the same time, comparisons between the Switch and the Nvidia Shield Android TV built from the same silicon show just how much extra performance is gained by having that direct low-level API access. And I think in that article there from Richard, it's got my main concern about the Steam Deck. It's a lot of money for something that's not very future-proof. Now, I've already got reservations about the Xbox Series X despite the Xbox Series S despite owning a Series S myself, but for now it's fine. But again, if you go into the full article and look at the technical specifications, the Steam Deck is even less so. Now, it did run Control and Jedi Fallen Order, but only at high settings. Now, if you're only playing on the actual handset itself, it's only going to have a 720p display, which is fine, especially if you're playing it just shy of an arm's length away from your face. It's going to do the trick. Now, where the Switch has its pros is its ability to be docked or handheld. I'm seeing a lot of the early focus on this being on the handheld. Now, Valve is going to produce a dock to put your Steam Deck in to hook up to a monitor or a television, but no mention yet about whether or not that's going to have any kind of upscaling. And I think in comparison to the Switch as a competitor, I think we're going to need to know more about that. Now, at the time of this recording, the Steam Deck went available for pre-order, and from what I can tell, sold out already. A lot of buying issues, a lot of people not able to add to cart. They're doing a deposit system to try and combat scalpers, but I don't think that's really going to do any kind of good. So, despite my reservations for it, it's still blowing it out of the water. And I think the core market that it's going to appeal to at the moment is indie gamers, rather than people who want to play Fallen Order and stuff like that. If you want to play high fidelity games, you're going to play it on your gaming PC, either with a controller, mouse and keyboards in that sedentary kind of position. I don't imagine many people wanting to take it out on the go. Not to say that there won't be. There's probably someone watching this right now who's like, actually, I'm quite fond of that, and that's great. But I'm just thinking at large, I think what's really going to have impact is with the indie community. For Switch, that's been a good selling point, to the point where it's almost a meme at this point. Whenever a new indie game comes out, someone will say, when's it coming to Switch? When's it getting ported to Switch? Because everyone expects Switch to be the home for indie games. And from recent news ramblings, it seems as if they're the easier platform to develop for, especially over Sony. But with Steam, you don't have that. You don't have that when's it coming to Steam, because Steam for many developers is the default. So already you're removing that disconnect. You've got the ability to take this new indie game that you buy out and go. Imagine you're playing Hades on your regular gaming computer, and then you decide to go away for a week with your family on holiday. I've got my Steam Deck, I'll take that with me and I'll complete Hades while everyone else is on the beach. So, indie is where Steam Deck is going to thrive, I think. Is it for me personally? Well, not really. As I said, I've got the Xbox Series S now. I should point out as well, I work from home, so portability, not really something I'm too super sold on. I got my Nintendo Switch back when I was originally commuting, and I was working from home pre-pandemic. It wasn't a pandemic mandated thing. But as soon as I started working from home, I have noticed my Switch usage has dived off pretty considerably. So again, that's why it doesn't appeal to me. I don't need that portability, but again, some do. If I had a Switch and I did commute, would I consider getting Steam Deck? Probably. Basically because, as Richard was saying there, the Steam library is so big. The Switch library is only a few years old, and it's also very heavily downweighted by the sheer amount of indie games that have made it to Switch, but Steam has a lot better search features for navigating all of those games which have came to the platform. So I think Steam is probably actually my preferred platform over Switch for the indies. My Switch has relegated itself to a first party only kind of thing. Pokemon, Zelda. Indie games I'm going to play on Steam, to be honest. Or Game Pass if it comes to Game Pass. So, is it for me personally? No, not in my current stage. But I really do hope it goes well. Because I think what we're seeing here, and we've been seeing it for some time, but I think this is... I don't want to use the term watershed moment, but I think we're at a turning point here where the lines between portable and home hardware are really starting to get blurred. I mean, even when you start gaming on your phones, you know, it was... I'm not good. Yeah, you know what, I will use the term mind-blowing back in the day. I mean, we're talking 10 years ago here before it became heavily microtransaction based, where game companies would actually port full games onto the phone and you just buy it and play it, no additional financial input needed. But I remember playing Infinity Blade on my phone, which was made by Epic Games. If you've not heard of that game, look it up. You can't buy it anymore, unfortunately, but it just seems so intuitive. No way could you get that kind of experience on a console. Kinect was a thing for the time for the Xbox, maybe with that kind of motion control, but the swiping, you couldn't replicate that with thumbsticks on a home console. And ever since mobile gaming, the lines are really getting blurred, and Nintendo really hit gold with Nintendo Switch. This idea that you can play it on your big screen at home, undock it, take it on the go with you, and it's an uncompromised experience except a smaller screen. So I do think Steam Deck has, and Valve by extension, have a lot to thank for Nintendo Switch. But I think, like the man who invented the wheel hundreds and thousands of years ago, they just made it. A lot of people have refined the wheel since. A lot of science has gone into the wheel, into your car tyres. I think Steam's about to make that kind of innovative jump. And I think because they've made the Steam Deck pretty open, I think you're going to see a lot of third parties make their own kinds of Steam Deck. Send it preloaded with Steam Deck perhaps. But yeah, I really look forward to seeing what happens with Steam Deck. I'm very curious as well. Before we wrap up, I do want to say it's a little curious that they're deciding to release this during the pandemic. I get it's probably been in the line for a while, but I feel like production probably wouldn't have started until maybe mid-2020. So I'm curious why they maybe didn't pause it and wait till after the pandemic, given the superconductor situation, which was getting serious earlier in 2020. And just knowing how the world was going to be, you know, scientists were saying, you know, this is here to stay for a while, you know, and I just feel like there's going to be such limited stock that, you know, it's going to be the PS5 all over again, really. But it will be interesting to look back on this and see how it fared 6 months to a year from now. I'll watch this video back, I'll be like, look at that camera, it's so blurry. But yeah. So I think that's it for today's show, folks. I just want to wrap up again by saying that if you want to talk about anything, any of the 3 subjects that I've talked about today, if you want to talk about your favourite Steam indie game, if you want to talk about, you know, any Netflix properties that you would like to see, write me a letter. The email address is at the bottom of this screen. Now, if you're watching this back at a later date, this may have changed, so double check the latest video just to make sure that this is still the current one. But if you want to talk about anything gaming related, write in and we'll have some open, lengthy, civil discourse about that. And other than that, folks, that's it for this week's show, and we'll see you next week here in the congregation. My name's Ryan MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod. See you later.